If the Bucks only retain one of their free agents, who is the most important one to keep this upcoming season, assuming Giannis is still here? And what do we think of parity in the NBA? Camille and I give you our thoughts coming up next on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined as always by Camille Davis. We thank you for making this your first listen of the day. And to all the everydayers out there leaving their thoughts in the comments, we've seen quite a few suggestions for that Bucks Untold story and a lot of thoughts on Giannis and free agency. So continue to do that. Camille mentioned at the top here, a lot of free agents. You and I went through everything on the Bucks roster, the very few players they have under contract, and some very notable names that are free agents. So we are doing this under the guise that Giannis is still on the team next season. So if we are to assume that, the list that we went over before, Kevin Porter Jr. is a restricted free agent. Ryan Rollins is a restricted free agent. Gary Trent Jr. is a free agent. Bobby Portis is potentially a free agent. Jericho Sims, everyone's favorite, is a free agent. There's a lot of names is the point of all of this. Who's the most important for the Bucks to continue to build something here with Giannis and stay, even if it is in that second or third tier of the Eastern Conference, stay in the mix to retain this this upcoming offseason here?
I think if you could only pick one, for me, that one would be Gary Trent Jr. I think what we've seen so far with this Bucks team as the regular season wound down without Damian Lillard, as we've seen in the playoffs, just having that guy who you can trust to knock down shots, not scared of the moment, you need that. And Gary Trent Jr. was somebody who, when it came up big, like he was knocking down shots. Like, yes, the turnovers, that is going to stand out from, how it ended here. But everything else that he brings to the table with his shooting ability, with his ability to play defense, being a bit aggressive too when it comes to playing passing lanes, reaching. Sometimes that gets you out of position, but sometimes it also gets you some steals and turnovers so you can get out there and run. I think Gary Trent Jr. is like the prototypical type of player that the Bucks are looking for to surround around Giannis, which is shooting, defender. That's it. That's what you need. You need shooting and you need defense. And he has both of those. And that's Gary Trent Jr. in a nutshell.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, 26 years old too. Just
That
turned
too.
26.
Big part.
Yeah, I suggested this one, and I'm really torn on it because we should say too. Oh, by the way, we didn't mention Brook Lopez or Taurean Prince in the list of free agents that the Bucks have here. I don't want to divert too much, so I'll save it for after I give my answer too. But yeah, to me, it comes down to Gary Trent Jr. and Kevin Porter Jr. And I have more belief in Gary Trent Jr. for all the things that you mentioned and what we saw in the postseason. I think he certainly had, albeit brief, but a better postseason run than Kevin Porter Jr. did. I just think, again, if we are to assume that Giannis is still here, you still need somebody else that can be that ball handler and quote unquote point guard. I mean, we assume if everything stays as is, Giannis is going to be your point center next year and you're going to play the way you did down the stretch of the season. But you still need more than just one guy that can initiate the offense. So to me, that's where Kevin Porter Jr. looms large. And it's, you can just get somebody as a veteran minimum and get somebody on the free agent market. I mean, Bucks have been searching for that for years. And you're talking about the likes of Campaign or Tyus Jones, who looked good early, but then kind of fell out of favor in Phoenix. So it's easier said than done. And that's, to me, what makes me start to gravitate towards Kevin Porter Jr. But I'm with you. I think in the end, I would still say Gary Trent Jr., but I think it's close between those two.
I do. And ideally, they get both of those guys back because we mentioned the fact that Gary Trent Jr. is 26, Kevin Porter Jr. is 25. And in addition to the shooting and defense, the youth, that's what the Bucks also need to continue to invest in going forward. Just having younger guys on the roster who they can lean on, put those minutes on, which is why AJ Green being under contract this upcoming season, I think is big for them. Would love to see an extension
And due
worked
for
out.
an extension, yeah.
Yeah, would love to see that worked out for him because I can see potential in him going forward. But yeah, and then we look at the playoffs too. When the game gets a little bit tighter, like probably not sustainable for Gary Trent Jr. to be a 50% 3-point shooter in the
You have a
playoffs.
couple of 30-point games in a 5-game
Right.
series.
Sprinkled in there. And even Kevin Porter Jr., he was like a 47% 3-point shooter in the
Yeah.
playoffs. And he got off to a really, really slow start in that series against the Pacers. So like both of them, what they're able to give, and two, the shot creation. Like, yes, they can definitely be catch and shoot shooters. Gary Trent Jr. in particular for that. But Gary Trent Jr. was also big, just going and get buckets of his own in the mid-range, just getting to a spot, little step back. That shot creation aspect of what they can bring to the table, both of them, I think, is really valuable as well.
Yeah, and part of it too for me in suggesting it's close between Kevin Porter Jr. and Gary Trent Jr. is the other name you mentioned in AJ Green, in that, well, you do have him. If you would love to retain Gary Trent Jr., but if things fall through there and that's not the case, I would assume AJ Green is your starting two guard and you have him to slot in there. The danger with that is, I think a lot of times you can get caught up in the, well, we have this player to step in and replace this guy. And it doesn't always work out as planned. I mean, look at the Denver Nuggets where I should rephrase that. It works, but it's okay. Then who is replacing the guy that replaced the guy? And that's where you run into trouble here. The Bucks have had that problem, ever since winning the championship. I mentioned Denver, that, comes back to KCP leaving, and you say, okay, Christian Braun is there to step in. Okay, who's replacing Christian Braun, though? The Celtics are probably going to be dealing with that this upcoming season. So that's where it starts to get tricky, not so much with the starter leaving, but what are you doing to replace that bench production?
Yeah, that's the piece of it, which is why it's like ideally you want to try to get both Gary and Kevin Porter back, because it's going to be important. Because who else comes up? And it's not as if, when you look at the roster now, like if AJ Johnson was never traded, I could see conversations this summer about like, what is his growth
never
look
going to
like?
hear the end of it now that you brought up the name.
I know, but listen, it's the reality of that. And when we get to draft conversations, I got some ideas and some things to talk about when it comes to how the Bucks might approach the draft too, based on what they did last year. But they're going to need the development. Like, you have to continue to have it. And Brook Lopez is a free agent this year. And I've been someone who said I would not mind Brook coming back if it's on a cheaper contract, not for him to come in and play big minutes, but for him to be another look you can throw out there, which I know there are some Bucks fans who don't want to hear anything about Brook Lopez being back at all. But if it was for a lower price, I'd be open to it. Although I think that he might actually get better offers elsewhere from teams that are center needy. So like that Tyler Smith, like you're going to need some guys to continue to step up here.
I think Brook Lopez is going to have a much larger market than a lot of Bucks fans who are not high on Brook Lopez anticipate. And I agree too. I mean, I'd love to have him back at a reduced rate to have the depth and to be able to monitor his minutes and pick your spots for him, but also to have a tradable contract, to be able to package with something. That was the other thing that was lost in the PJ Tucker, to take it all the way back to there. But look, just bite the bullet and have a deal that you can move. So you're not just letting an asset walk out the door. If it doesn't work out, you have this that you can combine with something else and bring in somebody at a higher rate. So that to me is the other big part with Brook Lopez. You've heard, I'm sure, quite a bit of the parity that's come into the league, as everyone is familiar with by now. This is going to be 7 champions in 7 different years. So I do want to take a look at the history of those teams. Is this actually good for the league, and how this relates to Giannis? The thought of parity, is it something that's actually going to keep Giannis in Milwaukee, or want him to stay in Milwaukee because of that? We'll get into that discussion coming up after the break here on Locked On Bucks. Well, when I found out Skims was making underwear for men, I was intrigued. I've heard so much about their quality from friends and family, so I had to give it a try, and I can assure you it lives up to the hype. We've all had issues with underwear, whether it be fit, comfort, or just finding the right style for you. Skims changes all of that. Their men's line offers something for everyone, from boxer briefs to classic briefs, all designed with the perfect balance of comfort and style. I tried the boxer briefs and I'm hooked. They're perfect for an active lifestyle. They move with you. They never lose their shape. They stay in place all day. Whether you're working out or just running errands, they're the most comfortable and reliable underwear you'll ever own and wear. The lightweight material also feels amazing. It's almost like you're wearing nothing at all. So head to Skims Men's. Shop for them at skims.com/lockedonnba and at Skims stores. Let them know we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select our show in the drop-down menu that follows. Skims, the official underwear partner of the NBA, WNBA, and USA Basketball. So the parity discussion, as we've heard quite a bit of, another champion, and even looking at Camille teams that make it back to the conference finals. The Pacers and Timberwolves have done it, but neither of them won the conference in that first year, I should say. Who knows what happens this year? But I guess plain and simple, and I don't mean this to. We're going to try to see if we can get Jim Wazarski on the show, but in his story, I think he even alluded to this too, where it wasn't a quote unquote report in the story. It was Jim responding to somebody and his belief that Giannis is not going to be traded this summer. Part of that was the injury to Jason Tatum and the fact that we will now have 7 different champions in 7 seasons. The Pacers coming from out of nowhere to be back-to-back conference finals appearances, and just where this league has headed, that the overall point of, look, I know this team is not in the best spot of any team in the Eastern Conference by any means, but look at how wide open the conference has been. If you have Giannis, you have a chance. So how much do you believe that, number one, and how much do you think that factors into any potential decision for Giannis?
I believe in that a lot. I was actually just talking about that on Technical File today for this week's episode of just how the landscape in the NBA is changing. Like, to have 7 different champions in 7 years, unprecedented for the NBA. This is a league that has been built upon the backs of dynasties. And with the way that the CBA is now shaping up, the windows for teams are going to be so much shorter because of just how much it's going to cost to keep those teams together and how restrictive it gets trying to add to your team if you're above that first apron or that second apron. It's no longer like, okay, we'll make these moves and just deal with the luxury tax. Like, they're restricting how you're able to build your team, which also makes me think that I mentioned it last summer when we were kind of tossing around, like, how will this change things? I think this is also going to make player development more important in the NBA, where these younger rookie contracts are going to be even more valuable than they were before, and really trying to get that development for those guys, because you're going to need productive players on those cheaper contracts going forward. And for Giannis and staying in the East, I think that's the alluring part of the pitch of, yes, I know the last 3 years have not gone as planned. You're not satisfied with that. We are not satisfied with that. When you look around the Eastern Conference and our pathway back to the finals, one, the pathway in the East is easier than the one in the West. Like, I contend that the East has gotten stronger than what it was 10 years ago, but the West is still ahead of where the East is. So one, let's stay in the East. Let's try to continue to make something here. And also, I feel like this playoffs has shown, if you can get there healthy, you have the right group, it's kind of turning NFL-ish in the sense of, like, get to the dance and just see what happens from that point going forward, because the matchups are going to determine a lot for these teams.
I'll save this thought for when we get into the 7 champs in 7 years discussion, but I largely agree with the sentiment of, look, there's parity in the league and the conference is going to be wide open. I don't expect the Celtics to be a tier 1 team in the East next season. I mean, we talked about it 2 weeks ago. Like, hey, are the Pacers going to enter next season as the favorites to win the East? That's the reality we're dealing with. You have Indiana and New York that are probably going to be the favorites. Cleveland is going to be up there as well, assuming nothing major changes, because that discussion isn't going to go away of, well, we gave it another year and you guys came up short in the second round. So can you really win with this group? Orlando, injuries, they're still searching for offense. There's, to your point, good teams, that it's not just two really good teams and then the bottom drops out in the conference anymore. Who knows what happens with Philly? I mean, I wouldn't bet on it, even though I did in our over-under draft. I wouldn't bet on it next year, but maybe Joel Embiid is all of a sudden healthy and things work.
I mean, even
the
Detroit.
76ers. Yeah, even Detroit with some money to spend. Granted, it's not a great free agency class, but there's a lot of teams that can talk themselves into, we think we got a chance. We got a young team. We got a team that started to develop. The Pistons have experienced the playoffs. The Magic have experienced the playoffs. Those types of conversations. We got money to spend. And there is no Boston Celtics anymore. There's no team that's so loaded top to bottom that we know we got to get past this team. So there's going to be a number of teams that come into the season next year with that feeling. I agree with the larger point that, hey, if you got Giannis, you got a chance. It doesn't matter how poorly your roster is constructed. You're going to have the best player in every single series that you're playing in. And it's just a matter of stay healthy and hit shots, play defense, find things that work, right? I think the danger of only leaning on that, and I'm not saying that's what you're doing, but I think this is what, in just looking at some of the correspondences with that story in the Journal Sentinel, I think this is what a lot of fans are kind of leaning on, is we got Giannis. If we can keep Giannis, we got a chance because it's a wide open conference, and look at what's happened the last couple of years. Yes and no. I think the one thing we're losing sight of is the model seems like it's one star and then playable guys, depth around them. For the longest time, we talked about depth not being important. I think what we've learned the last 2 years is playoff depth is important. You need 8 guys, and as every coach will tell you, you play 8 guys, you trust 7 of them. Like, that is extremely imperative. So to have Giannis is big, but you need depth. Like, you can't have any weak spots. That's what stands out the most about the Indiana Pacers is, what can you attack? Like, we can talk about Tyrese Halliburton. Well, he's a poor defender. Attack him. He's made some pretty big defensive plays in this playoffs so far. They dictate the pace. They just bring in these guys that they can play and find the right spots to play. It's not the conversation we had again of, well, it's tough to play Brook Lopez against this type of team, where those are the things you have to avoid, to just have 8 guys, 7 guys that, you know, we can play these guys in any situation. That is becoming more and more apparent. And in the past, you could get by because you had 2 superstars in your team. And that's just not how the league is structured anymore. So that's the big thing. Keep Giannis. Yes, that gives you a chance. But, okay, the names we talked about, we think they're important. If you can retain them, you're still coming up about 2 short that you need to find somewhere.
Yeah, and again, we're assuming that Brook Lopez is gone this offseason. Well, I shouldn't put words in your mouth. I'm assuming. Okay. I think Brook ends up getting a better offer elsewhere than what the Bucks will be willing to do.
I'm like 60-40, 55-45 that he's gone. So pretty close to 50-50.
Okay. Well, so again, it's like we mentioned, we want Gary Trent Jr. back. You want Kevin Porter Jr. back. You have AJ Green. Assuming Giannis is still on the roster, that's 4 different guys right there. Bobby Portis Jr. is another guy this offseason where it feels to me like Bobby might be out of Milwaukee, and I do wonder what that could look for the Bucks. If sign and trade is on the table for him, what they could bring in there, but we can save that conversation for another time. But I think your overall point of just needing solid guys around the star is well taken, because even with the Pacers, it's like Halliburton is the one who is talked about the most. That's the all-star, but Siakam has been that consistent guy for them. So I think it's like you get the star, and then who was that second guy who you can count on night in and night out, where the lows and the highs don't vary too much, where you can kind of count on them. Because even for the Thunder in the Western Conference Finals, like, is J-Dub going to be able to consistently hit that role? Like, he was an all-star this year, but we saw in that Denver series, when he was not on, it was really, really tough for the Thunder to get going. And he had a few stinkers in that series, and it went 7. Game 7, he showed up. So, like, yes, I definitely believe in that top-end talent. But I think, like, that second star doesn't have to necessarily be an all-star, but he has to be consistent. And then around that, the weak link cannot be weak enough that it can cause your whole armor
unplayable on one end. Yeah. It's since you brought up Bobby Portis, I do want to take a look at that. So we'll get into the Bobby Portis discussion and more thoughts on this 7 champs in 7 years. Like, Do you like this version of the leaguers? Something of, hey, I would have loved this 20 years ago, 30 years ago, but now we got this guy named Giannis and Damian Lillard. So I'd much rather we go back to how the NBA was when I was growing up. We'll get into that conversation coming up after this. Shopping for a car should be exciting, not exhausting, but between the confusing prices and hidden fees, it can feel overwhelming. That's why you're going to love using Car Gurus. They help you cut through the noise and show you the best deals with full confidence. With over 4 million listings, Car Gurus has more new and used cars than any other major online marketplace in the U.S. They verify dealers, provide real price analysis, and give you the tools and data you need to make the right choice without second-guessing yourself. If you need a deal you can trust, Car Gurus makes it easy to compare vehicles side by side with unbiased deal ratings. The best feature is their price drop alert, so you know exactly when the perfect car is available for your budget. And plus, the in-depth vehicle detail gives you peace of mind before stepping onto any lot. It's no wonder SimilarWeb estimated traffic data shows Car Gurus is the #1 most visited car shopping site. Buy or sell your next car today with Car Gurus at cargurus.com. Go to cargurus.com to make sure your big deal is the best deal. That's cargurus.com, cargurus.com. So you brought up the name of Bobby Portis, and it's an interesting one because, I know I made this point quite a bit during the regular season that, look, there's more money out there for Bobby Portis. When you look at the deal that he's currently on and what he's being paid, Bobby Portis is making less than, I shouldn't even poke the bear here, but he's making less than Kyle Kuzma, and we know what Bucks fans think of that. So the natural inclination is just to look at the productivity that Bobby Portis has given you, where he's basically been a walking double-double. And not only that, just the durability of Bobby Portis too. Like the games he missed were because his grandmother passed away and because of his suspension. So he's been good for 75 games a year and basically 15 and 10 points, the ability to give you even more points on a nightly basis. So I think there's a lot of value there to Bobby Portis. And even some of the questions and criticisms that we've had at times over his defensive fit, to me, those were muted last year because you once again improved the defense that was around him, that it got back to where it was around the era of the Bucks winning a championship, where it didn't quite stand out as much. But as I kind of review the landscape of the rest of the NBA, I think the only way Bobby Portis is gone is if Giannis is no longer on the team. And then he just says, okay, I'm going to move on to something else here where I can compete for a championship. But looking at #1, teams that are going to have cap space, the Brooklyn Nets have $67 million. Are they going to throw a lot of money at Bobby Portis? Maybe. Maybe Bobby Portis is one of the best free agents that's going to hit the market in that sense, that's willing to listen to Brooklyn. But I don't know. That team's still very far away. If you're going to get paid, if you're going to get the bag, then get it. But that's not one I really see as a fit for Bobby. The Pistons are interesting with $24 million. And it seems like in terms of personality, that'd be a pretty good fit for Bobby Portis. But they got some bigs in front of them that fit pretty nicely with what they're doing. So I don't know that that's a good fit. The Rockets could be interesting. They got $10 million in cap space. We know they came hard after Brook Lopez a couple of years ago. And Bobby Portis is a guy with a shooting ability. Probably fits pretty nicely next to a guy like Alperen Şengün or Jabari Smith Jr. So, yeah, that's one that's interesting. But is Bobby Portis going to be high on the list of priorities for the Rockets, especially if they're maybe trying to see if they can pry Giannis loose or Kevin Durant or somebody else in a trade? Then you got the Memphis Grizzlies, who, again, already addressed their bigs. And I don't think that's a great fit for Bobby. The Timberwolves, as of this moment, have some cap space, but they got decisions to be made on Julius Randle and Naz Reid. Now, do they say we lost Julius Randle? Maybe Bobby Portis is a cheaper replacement? I don't know. Maybe that's one to at least keep an eye on. But the point is, those are the teams with cap space. The Wizards barely have cap space. So then it comes down to that non-taxpayer mid-level amount, and that's basically the amount that Bobby Portis is making right now. And has that option for. So it's something that the Bucks can certainly match. That it's kind of the same thing we said before about Gary Trent Jr. and Kevin Porter Jr. I know it's easy to get enamored with these guys and say, hey, there's a ton of money elsewhere, but I don't know where it is because of how the league is structured. That I think we're going to start to see a lot of changes in how business is done in terms of what money is out there for those types of guys and what assets are given up in trades, to the point you made before about the importance is develop guys. That I really wonder, what's the trade landscape look like from now on? Like, of course, if you can get a guy like Giannis, you're going to trade picks for Giannis. But I think we're headed into an era where a lot of teams are going to be like Sam Presti and saying, hey, we're keeping our draft picks.
Yeah, keeping the draft picks, or you're seeing those trades where it's like we're kind of moving chairs around the deck because it's like, this isn't working for us, that's not working for you, but maybe if we make this trade, it can work for both of us here. And I think my concern levels for Bobby not being in Milwaukee next season wasn't even necessarily about like which teams have cap space, which is great to know, of thinking of like, if he wants to go to a winning situation, who could really pay him the amount of money that the Bucks could. When I looked at the market of just who is coming available, like who are the free agents this summer, it's like Bobby Portis is one of the top names on that power forward market, because you mentioned Julius Randle. He has the player option in Minnesota. Aldama in Memphis, he's restricting free agents. You know how that goes. You got Bobby Portis with the player option. You got John Collins with a player option. You got Dorian Finney-Smith, if you want to count him as a big, based on the Lakers were using him, with a player option. You got Yabusele on the market. You got Chris Boucher. Like, the names as you start going down, you're like, Bobby is one of the top names in that power forward list. So like, if he wanted to explore his options, I think they would be out there for him. And if he did go that route, maybe there would be a way for the Bucks to recoup something in the process of him leaving, if that's what he decides. But I could definitely see his decision being tied to Giannis, because who's wouldn't? Like, if I'm trying to win, like, if you're still here, then let's see what we can do. But otherwise, I'm going to see what else is out there on the market.
Yeah, I mean, Julius Randle, as you mentioned, is the name that's going to come up a lot. Naz Reid is going to have to get paid too. I think Rui Hachimura is potentially a free agent as well. So there's some names that can come open, but it's not a great free agent class here. So it really comes down to who has money that's willing to spend it, and the fit too for a guy like Bobby Portis. And if it comes down to somebody else can offer me the mid-level exception, but Giannis is here, I know what I have in Milwaukee. I think we saw last year, especially, that pairing of Giannis and Bobby Portis was probably at its peak in terms of their on-court performance. So yeah, if it all comes down to I can make slightly more than the Bucks are paying me, or I can stay with the Bucks and play next to Giannis, then I think he stays here. And I think in that situation too, and it's why everything hinges on Giannis, not just for the Bucks, but for other teams to figure out, okay, if he's not going to be traded, we need to move on to plan B. Like if it's Houston, for example, saying, okay, let's see if we can pry loose Kevin Durant. But for the Bucks too, you get that commitment, and it's, all right, Bobby, if you decline this option, we can extend you. Maybe you even give us a little bit. We get a haircut here where you take a little bit off that deal. We'll extend you for 4 years, something like that, and start to save some money there to give you even more flexibility here. Now, obviously, there's things that other teams can do too to free up some more things and renounce players. But just with the initial list of teams that have cap space, and it's not even Bobby's ranking among power forwards if he opts out, just free agents in general. It's not a great class, but the guys that are in front of him, that's where the money's going to go to. So the likelihood is it is coming down to that mid-level exception range. And in that case, if most of the group is staying as is, you have comfort in Milwaukee and you believe in what they're building towards and think they can get out of this hole they've been in for 3 years now, but you get to play next to Giannis, I don't think I'm being a homer here. I just don't see why he would leave that.
Shoot. And I mean, if Brook Lopez is gone this offseason and Bobby does stay, like, does Bobby move into the starting lineup then?
Yeah.
Like, is that enticing enough of, in addition to the comfort you have here, you are now going to start alongside Giannis as the front court for the Milwaukee Bucks going forward? Like, role could play a part in that as well. Like, he's been a soldier coming off the bench. He's been great. 6th man of the year contention type of player, but bigger roles, like these guys want to play. So if that's something that could help entice him to stay alongside Giannis, like I'm here for it. Like Bobby is a guy who I also want to stay. And you mentioned like the Giannis piece of like, that's the first domino to fall, not just for the Bucks, but like the NBA landscape, because when a guy like Giannis is examining what his options are, everyone's kind of pause until he kind of lets you know what he's thinking. And that's part of why like our offseason for Locked On Bucks, like it's been some crossovers with trades, because it's like we don't know until we hear from Giannis, and we know that meeting's happening sometime this week. So hopefully we get word on what his intention is going forward over the next couple of weeks.
And I'm going to be honest, Camille, I don't know how many more times we can do well, if Giannis wants to do this, so for no other reason, let's just get this out of the way so we know what direction we can fully lean into here. And hey, here's the other thing too with Bobby. For the longest time, we've had that conversation. We, as in everyone, Bucks fans and everyone around the team too, of like, who's getting their number retired from this group? And you knew Giannis is a given. Chris is a given. I think at this point, Brooke is pretty close.
He's close
to that list. Bobby Portis signs an extension and stays here. Bobby Portis is getting his number retired as a part of the championship team, how long he will have been in Milwaukee, and just his impact in the community. So that's the other minor selling point of Bobby. You're going to go down as a franchise legend here.
Yeah, and I mean, we know how he feels about Milwaukee too. So with Bobby and with Giannis, like it's no question of how they feel about the city and the franchise itself. It's just, can the front office, can John Horst and Doc Rivers sell them on what the vision of this team is for the 2025-26 season and beyond that? Like, what's the sell, and can you get them to buy into it? Because if so, like you're starting with something. And I think that the base of the Bucks are going to start with is a bit better than what some other outside media might think of where the Bucks are starting, if they're able to bring back Gary and Kevin and Bobby alongside Giannis and AJ Green. Like that's 5 right there. So you got to keep trying to build that bench out. And again, you got development from Tyler Smith. You got, if Ajax can take another step in his development this offseason, another guy you can bring in there. So like Ryan Rollins, like there are some guys for the Bucks, younger guys at that are really interesting if their growth can continue to keep up for the pace of where the Bucks are trying to get to.
We had it listed to talk about the parity a little bit more in 7 champs in 7 years, but we took so much time talking about Bobby Portis that we're going to save that for a little bit later in this week, and we'll be able to know who's up in the Western Conference Finals and take a look at the Eastern Conference Finals on tomorrow's show as well. And also some homework for you, Camille. I mentioned this off the air. The Untold series and what would be the best story for the Bucks. I shared my thoughts. We got a lot of comments on that, so we'll get your idea coming up a little bit later in the week as well. That'll do it for today's show. For Camille, I'm Justin. We'll talk with you guys once again tomorrow on Locked On Bucks.